TradCatKnight special guest premium podcast. Today is January 26, 2019. And folks, I have with us today a very special guest, a man who's been on the program before. We try to get him on as often as we can because of his expertise. Mr. Gill Broussard, independent Planet-7X researcher. You could get to his website, Planet-7X.net. You also have YouTube channel. Again, I will allow Gill at the end, as I typically do, to do all of his shameless self-promotion time. Now, Gill, we want to jump right into it if we could, sir. We're experiencing a lot of extreme temperatures around the world. It's not only the freezing cold here in the United States. We've got these reports of crocodiles freezing, in the southeast. It's ridiculously cold out where I am. As a matter of fact, next week, I think a 3-day stretch, the high is like 4 degrees with lows of like -5 or -10. Chicago, there was a report on Drudge today. Chicago is colder than Antarctica. But then on the flip side of things, we've got extreme heat being experienced about a week or two ago down in Australia. There was an article I saw, I think it was Strange Sounds, where they said Australia went through 5 days of hell, all types of horses dying, water holes not having any water. How do we make this a connection to Planet X? That's the first question, Gil. And then prospects for the years ahead. Like in 2 years from now, will it be typical for us to be at this point in time perhaps in sub-zero temperatures, and that will just be kind of the norm, or is that a stretch, do you think?
Maybe in certain areas of the world, like if the Gulf Stream, if the Gulf Stream conveyor belt stops, which it has slowed down considerably, and scientists are extremely worried about it, and they're monitoring it in great detail. You would see temperatures like Moscow for the winter. You'd see that throughout Ireland and England area, because this conveyor belt called the Gulf Stream warms up the air in that region, and it's just the way the water flows in the Atlantic, and that conveyor belt is slowing down, about to stop, and that will change temperatures throughout Eastern Europe. So yeah, there'll be some areas, but not across the globe or anything like that.
Now, what about in terms of extreme heat, but to the heat as opposed to the cold? Will certain areas like Australia continue to get a lot hotter? I mean, in the years past, we've seen certain areas hit like 123 temperatures, 123-degree temperatures, and roads are melting or this or that. Is it going to get worse than that in certain areas, or will it kind of maintain status quo, do you think?
That's hard to say, but I would say that probably it would get worse, but it's going to be random patterns. The weathermen are going to have a tough time trying to predict weather, which you already seen that.
Oh yeah.
Because of you see erratic changes in the jet stream. It doesn't have its normal patterns. So just like those polar vortexes, that type of thing. You never used to hear that.
Right.
In the news now it's getting common.
Yes.
So there will be points where you do have these extreme points, but it's not going to be extreme across the board. I'm not into this sensationalism. I want facts more than just saying that these extremes are going to be across the board. That doesn't happen.
Right.
But we are going to see record breakers again still throughout the world. I had a lady friend of mine that was in Australia. Let me see if I can find that text, and she had text me that the price of lamb over there was 55, something like I think it's dollars. They have $55 a pound.
Yikes.
And that was because of the drought.
Yeah.
Now you have to break that down. I think it's 3-to-1 or somewhere like that for the Mr. Australian money. But it was extreme, and that was because of the drought. And if some of your listeners want to see what might the future hold, if they were to take a look at a video Peter Zion makes, the name of it is America at the Edge, and I sent you a picture of his map of his study that shows what countries are going to be lacking about 40% of their normal food coming into their country, whether grown or imported in. Well, this matches CO
Right.
4, where almost 2 billion people die, so that's a quarter of the world population. Well, that's very close to 2 billion people. And I have a study from India. Okay, they did. They're looking at a severe shortage of water for over 600 million people. And they don't mention about the agriculture for the crops or the animals. They don't mention that about 20 to 30% of their water needs is for their electrical production to keep factories open. That's not mentioned in the study. So you have the same thing happening with Africa and many parts in Asia. So I don't think it's going to be, hopefully, it won't be as severe in Australia, but they are having a very tough time. And so,
Yeah, no doubt about it. And since you're such a statistical man, Gil, and I definitely appreciate that too. I mean, I try to point to things statistically, but then also try to show visually, every month, the latest birth pangs that are happening. And I recently had on Marshall Masters a couple weeks ago, and in his statistical studies, he has indicated that 2018 was the worst year yet for earthquakes and fireballs. The latest USGS today, as it relates to quakes in diverse places, these are quakes around the 5.0 mark. Indonesia, Japan, Colombia, Fiji. I already said Japan. We have Solomon Islands. Let's see, Tonga, Vanuatu, Peru, even. So they're kind of spaced out all over. My question, and in addition to that, also volcanic activity, according to Watchers.news, has produced more deaths this year than in the previous 18 years combined. So my question for you is, this system gets closer. What does 2019 look like? I think the most recent volcano that was popping off was Manam, I think, out in Papua New Guinea. But it's getting pretty dangerous in this area too. And I don't know. I don't know if you saw this report too, Gil, but recent reports are indicating by mainstream scientists that they're very concerned about Yellowstone for 2019. All kinds of reports are coming out.
Anybody with a brain in the head would be very, very concerned about Yellowstone because its activity and the swelling and the dome pressure and areas of the park are closed. It's still a ways off from probably rupturing or anything, but it is a great concern because if you look at the magnitude on what it's equivalent to, like if you were to put it in, equivalent to like Hiroshima bombs or something like that, it's way off the scale. If I was to mention a number, it'd be incredible. It's
Right.
so, but just like you said, the volcanoes, there's like about anywhere from 12 to 1500 volcanoes that are on the crust of the earth. Okay, but subsea, they don't even mention these. There's 3.4 million under the sea. Well, on the average lately, right now, we only have like 1 or 2 a year but now we're having 21 in a day, 21, 22 in a day that are going off. If you take that same average, 22, in the ratio of 1,200 to 1,500 volcanoes and apply that to the 3.4 million that's under the sea, you're looking at 60,000 of them that are releasing magma under the sea. Now, that would cause a lot of fish death. A lot of animals in the sea would die because of the methane release. They're super sensitive to methane, parts per million. And that would also warm up the most active region in the Ring of Fire is off the coast of Japan and China there, and that's where El Nino and La Nina starts. Kind of the water will warm up right there, and then it heads towards South America, and that warm air rises, and that changes our weather pattern. Matter of fact, we're supposed to have a much an ice more ice this winter here on the coastline of the southern coastline of the U.S. because of that, and that's what's causing the warming of our oceans. And there's not a single mention of that. We've had two islands that were created in a single day.
Right.
You know, it didn't take millions of years, did it?
Yeah, very interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
now you said that, Gil. I mean, I'm right here on strangesounds.org, which is not a mainstream website. And again, you're not going to find this type of information as Gil has just alluded to in the mainstream. But here on strangesounds.org, this was just a week ago. Eruption at Rincon de la Vieja volcano in Costa Rica acidifies rivers, killing hundreds of fish in Cayman. So only points to what Gil had just previously been saying about these volcanoes popping off. And that's a point, Gil, that we don't talk about enough is these underground volcanoes popping off, which not only are doing that, but they're seemingly creating new land masses in certain areas. I'm sure you've seen this as well.
Yes, there's one particular island that is new. I forgot something like it's like almost 1,000 feet high now. One of the islands, I think it was made maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, it's still adding to its height and width. But there's so much in the news now that they can't cover it all. They just like I said, as it comes closer, the magnetic field, not gravity, it's the magnetic field that's affecting all of our planets, including Earth and the Sun. All of the planets are showing effects. They're heating up, everything. Um, that's one of the reasons why if you take the tilt of our magnetic field and plot it, you see that it is pulled towards the south of the universe. Our North Pole magnetic field that moved from the center of Canada, right next to the North Pole of the geographic pole. It's just a short distance away is the magnetic pole. And now scientists are confused because now it's stopped and it's wobbling around that area. It didn't go towards Siberia. Well, this matches the pattern of the past times that this planet has passed. Every 360 years or so, it's documented in the magnetic fields of Earth. We can go back almost 2,000 years. And the magnetic field of Earth does this exact same thing it's doing right now when it's in its close approach. So as it gets closer, you're going to see meteors that the orbits are going to be warped. There's a study since the mid-90s that they started that the orbits of comets, which are much, much larger than meteors, were warped in a certain region of space. And that was like a 12-year study. And that was confirmed by the UK even, by a study over there. And guess what? Same area of space, Sagittarius, which is south of the universe, okay? It's not where polar south is, like Marshall Masters and many of these other people would point to. This is not where it's at, and it's not a mini system. It's if you want to describe it with any kind of accurate term, it's a planet/comet. It's either a very large comet, you want to call it, or a planet that has the characteristics of a comet with an orbit, which is a elliptical orbit. We have its path, which is clearly documented in the Chinese records. And this overlay, when we bring this same overlay throughout history, we have an exact match. This has been here multiple times.
Yeah. Now, mainstream media, Gil, is reporting upon, this was just in the past few weeks, and again, this was all over the place. I thought I originally saw it on Drudge, where they were indicating science has just found another inhabitable Earth-like planet that's way out there, and they were trying to denote it's not Planet X. In times past, I believe you and I have talked about the Planet-9 theory and it being like way beyond Pluto or whatnot. If you could perhaps get into this a little bit, why this is a farce. Where do you think, and I know you wanted to talk about this, where Planet X currently is, and when will we see it with the naked eye?
Well, when they first had confirmation of with the Pioneer and Voyager probes, that was about 10 to 12 years outside our solar system, outside of Neptune, if we use Neptune as the edge, okay? And Neptune is about roughly 30 astronomical units away from Earth, okay? It takes, with normal, the software tells us, once you plot the established course of what the Asian astronomers, we had like 20 or 30 Asian astronomers in China, another 20 or 30 in Korea, another 20 or 30 in Japan. They were all the astronomers of the emperors at the time. And they didn't know each other at the time, and they documented this thing. And we have the data. And I was the first one to plot it. And with this orbit, it would take 16 years once it reached Neptune's orbit to reach the sun. Now, the question is, what year does it arrive? I have no data to say when it arrives, except we have hints. We have data, we have hints that's in the Bible. One, it says the earthquakes will rise like the pains of a woman giving birth. Okay? And then that you have to see CO3, 4, and 5. CO3 is economic problems throughout the globe. CO4 4 is, it talks about 2 billion people dying. Most of that is going to be famine, though it mentions war in there. You have a war in the Middle East because it's heating up right now. And then 5 is a peace agreement. So that has to happen before. But what it gives you in astronomy terms is that the moon has to be at the foot of Virgo. There's only 2 times in recent history right here. That's 2016, which was a Jubilee year. That gave me great concern. And 2021, March, date 30 and 31st. The moon is at the foot of Virgo again. At 3.5 days to 3 days after Passover. This is matching the math that's given in the book of Revelation. This is significant. And he says that he will return at midnight after the 2 prophets show up first. Mid of night, not midnight, but mid of night. That's different than 12 o'clock, because that day is going to be 12 extra hours longer. Because the Earth will slow down on its axis like it did in Joshua's long day. There, we can have a physical model. The physicists are more correct on the model on how the universe works than astronomers are, and that's a critical point to make. Without this knowledge, you're going to be deceived by the astronomers at the time, because they're in charge of announcing anything pertaining to space. Right. But the astronomers, the physicists, are much more correct. Earth, and there's a model that if you read the story of Joshua and apply the physics model, you see how it slowed down. The tail of this comet is plasma. Earth enters into the tail, which is not, the tail points opposite of the sun. The direction of the movement of the planet is ahead of us, but the tail is pointing at us. And that's slowing Earth down by 4.5 to 5.5% compounded hourly, where we do come to a complete slow stop. And we have a delay of 12 hours. Therefore, the target zone is the opposite side of Earth than what the astronomers are claiming. Because if they have the wrong model, they will predict the wrong half of the Earth happening. How did they get this 2,000 years ago correct in the Bible? When we just now, within the last 15 years, are coming to the conclusion, at least some of us are, that the universe is electromagnetically ruled, not gravity ruled. And so So it greatly concerned. I can't say for definite because I have no way of predicting the future. I can only give estimates.
Right.
So running back from March 2021, 13 years prior to that, 13 months prior to that is when the Asians saw it without a telescope. That would bring you to March 6th, 2020. If people have a lot of light pollution, they probably won't see it till another month or two later. But that's when you start looking up, and they have to shut down the internet probably anywhere from 4 to 6 months, maybe 9 months before this.
Yeah, very
Well,
interesting. Yeah.
if it's exactly 5 months before that date that Trump showed on his table, November 5th, sanctions are coming. So I kind of find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's
That,
very interesting. You see a lot of people in the government talking about, potential EMP, here in this country, but total blackout, if you will. And there's no doubt they're going to try to hide this as long as they can. Now, what do you make of individuals? And again, we try to be respectful as we can, Gil. I bring on, people from the Earth Changes community. That's how I kind of label it. And everyone kind of has their own opinion. We now have, I know Steve Olson, Marshall Masters. I know Marshall Masters specifically said he has already seen it with his own eyes. As a matter of fact, I think he published it on Yowza. He's quite convinced that he saw it. So I want to get your opinion on these types of videos and pictures, what your analysis from a scientific standpoint says. But then also you mentioned physicists, and there's that Dr. Claudia Albers over on Planet-X News. And I think within this past year, I think she indicated, you can correct me, but I thought she said she thought it was somewhere near Mars, this Planet-X. And again, she being an astrophysicist, I wanted to get your opinion on those. On her specifically, her analysis, but also others reporting that we can see it right now, essentially in the Earth Changes community.
well, one of the things you have to look for is consistency. Whenever you see a planet moving, it's going to move very slow from its position when it's far, if it's like at Mars or Jupiter. It doesn't take say erratic movements and you see it on the opposite side of the universe. That doesn't happen. Okay, remember, like I said, it took 16 years from Neptune's orbit to reach the sun, and it's coming from the same direction, Saturn. Sagittarius on the ecliptic. Okay, show me one of these yahoos that points to that area and shows you consistent data. No, they're all over the sky, from one end to the other with different size objects. There is nothing in the public realm. There's no sighting in the public realm at the moment that's valid. Might have some in the government realm, which I'm pretty sure there is, the Vatican and so on. But there's nothing valid in the public realm at this time. And I don't believe we're going to see the Bible alludes that we're going to have a short notice. Now, that shouldn't happen with modern equipment for there's many
Right.
amateur astronomers, but that concerns me. It alludes to that. Well, how can that possibly? Well, they have the ability of cloaking. Now, once this thing reaches the orbit of Jupiter, that's when the tail will start to glow. As it gets closer to the sun, the tail gets longer and brighter. Okay, because it's plasma. The magnetic field of this planet, which seems to be very intense, because this thing was affecting us all the way from the edge of the universe. Jupiter doesn't affect us to the extent of this object coming in. Okay, this has a high magnetic field for some reason. It's either almost all metallic, which scares me a little bit, because it has to be heavy and dense, because it plowed to a planet called Ceres and totally destroyed it. Yet it survived and continued on. So this has to be extremely dense, more metallic. The more research I'm looking at, And then the more metallic it is, the smaller in size that it is, and probably darker. If
Now,
you ever
Gil,
looked at,
how big is it? Is it still 7 to 10 times the size of the Earth? Is that the model? We're
if
still.
if it was made out the similar material density as the Earth, yeah, we're looking at anywhere from 5 to 7 times, depending on what material. But with the magnetic field, if you look closely at the data that we're receiving, with on what our eyes are witnessing, this has a very strong magnetic field. We know it destroyed Ceres. I know it caused the Earth to tilt about 3 times before, 26 to 28 degrees. We had a pole shift of 26 to 28 degrees. This thing could be more like 3 times, or 2 times the size of Earth. And because if it's a solid piece of, let's say, iron or whatever, or piece of metallic of different metals, it doesn't need to be as big, because the density is what gives
Right.
its orbit.
Now, what about the recent studies or the recent findings that the magnetic pole, what is it, being more pulled towards? I forget what area they said, but it was baffling scientists. I don't have it in front of me because you just mentioned something that just triggered into my brain. I'm only I'm just curious as to what you think, how this specifically relates to Planet X, and I'm sure this probably didn't baffle you. I mean, you probably were expecting this, but apparently mainstream scientists are just scratching their heads at this latest report. They have no idea what's going on. Why the poles are
Correct.
shift? Yeah,
Correct. They even state that they have no reason they don't know why it reversed, because it's going to wobble right in that area. Okay, that's as far as north as it's going to go. It's going to wobble. It's going to go right, left. Make a, because that's what it did in the past. That is the true center of the relationship between the magnetic north and the geographic north, because the geographic north wobbles also around the magnetic field right there. So it found the center of the wobble of the geographic center, in other words, okay? But whenever you plot it throughout the year, for the last 5 or 6 years, there's a website that did that. You will see that the there's only one particular area that is stretched in, and that's around July, maybe 6 or 9, somewhere around that. Well, that's exactly the point. If you remember, the calendar is a fixed area around the sun, on Earth's orbit around the sun. So the position on where Earth is in July 6th at midnight, right there, you're facing south of the universe exactly. So the maximum amount of tug that's warping the Earth magnetic field is there, and that's exactly where I would expect it to be, because that's its closest position to the planet coming in. Therefore, it'd have the greatest effect on Earth.
yeah, that makes sense.
And we have a problem. It's a serious problem.
Yeah, I would say so. Pretty big problem. Now, the latest Earth changes front, the latest news, we've got flash flooding occurring all over the place. Turkey, Algeria. I mean, it, of course, is happening pretty much in every country. As you have mentioned earlier, a lot of these news reports, they're just flying under the radar. Can't possibly keep up with this news as best I try to on a daily basis. But one of the major news headlines over the past 24 to 48 hours are these gigantic sinkholes popping up. There's one that's really frightening looking out in Chile. There was another one, I think it was in the Los Angeles areas. So, according to your model, where do you think the worst areas will be hit in relation to these sinkholes? Just how bad does it get? And I believe we talked about this in times past, like that movie 2012, where you kind of see the West Coast just kind of crumbling. What was it, the California area just kind of crumbling off into the sea? Is that far stretched, or is that pretty believable?
Hollywood, if this planet, if the accounts in the Bible for the future events are 1/4 of what they're talking about, Hollywood has not even come close to representing what will happen to the coastlines and Earth in general.
Wow.
Not even close. How long? Remember, the earthquakes in a movie is roughly shown a magnitude 10. That has not been documented yet in human history. Okay, and they show that in movies, magnitude 10. Okay, the Bible talks about a magnitude, a earthquake after the fiery mountain hits Earth, which is a large meteor. That's the second event, five months later, where we run through the meteor, debris where it crossed Earth's path the first time. That's 5 months later. Hits Earth. It says every wall on Earth is either cracked or crumbled. You're talking about a magnitude 14 or more.
Wow.
If you look at like at each number up, like 0.1, 0.2, it's like 13 times greater than the previous one. So do the math on that.
Now we've talked about this before in times past, and yeah, from our perspective, there were a couple Catholic mystics in the church that talked about this comet coming to hit us in the end times too, which is a representation of, I think it's Apocalypse 8. No, it's not 8:7 because that's the fire coming down from heaven. I forget what it is. Maybe it's Apocalypse. Well, I don't know. You would know better probably go off the top of your head. But yeah, I'm right there.
Hail is in seal 6 and seal 7. They're 5 months apart. He says they will wish death for 5 months before death comes. That's only on the half of the Earth that's hit by the meteor shower, and that half gets hit twice, basically, 5 months apart.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've talked about this, from our side of things when we're dealing with the earth changes. There was one particular mystic in the church, approved by the church, that talked about whole countries being swallowed up, basically, I mean, very rapidly. So that's the reason why I asked you, because I'm right there with you. I don't think we're going to see things we're just going to scratch our heads, Gil, and be like, did we just see that? Like, I mean, are we in a movie? It's just going to be beyond our comprehension, I believe. And I think this is why Jesus said, people will die of fear of like knowing what's next. Like we'll see something happen on the other side of the globe and it'll be like, are we next? It'll just be like kind of like Russian roulette, according to, some people. They will have no idea what's going on if you don't know what Gil and I are talking about. If you do, then at least you have some perspective as to why these things are happening around the world. So would you agree with someone like John Moore when I always ask my analysts on Planet X, Earth changes, just how bad it will be, how bad of a kill off will it be? And he's always suggested to me, 90 to 95% of Earth Earth population won't be here. Do you think that number still stays true to this day, or where's your model when all is said and done?
Well, I'd say that's close. No one really knows the exact number yet. The Bible talks about those type of numbers. If you look at, it says a quarter of the world population dies first. Most of that's going to be famine. That's the next critical thing. If you want to talk to your people listening to you right there, is that when we go through CO3, financial distress globally, some of these banks will close, and a farmer can't get their loan. They need to put seed in the ground. Well, you only have a certain amount of a window to put seed in the ground. Otherwise, you have no crop the following year. So that's going to cause famine almost within 1 year. You'd see about 2 billion people die within the next 2 years after that. Within that 2-year period. That's the greatest threat coming up. Is financial collapse that would cause the farmers not to be able to get their loans to put seed in the ground. So John Moore, on a lot of his data, is very, very, very good. Matter of fact, out of all of the ones you mentioned, he's probably the most accurate, except for one point. Someone gave him some information that came off the internet. It's not factual. And that was a solar system coming in. Okay? And so that's the only point. If you take that out of the equation, most of his data is right on par. The government has prepared many underground facilities.
Right. Yeah. No doubt about it.
In many of the top countries now, mostly the G20, most of these smaller nations, they don't have a clue. They're not telling them because they don't have the resources, they don't have the finance, they don't have the capability to even prepare for it. Even if you told them, only thing it would do would cause panic.
Yeah, and that's what I think they're trying to eliminate in all this, a little whitewash it and create all kinds of Planet-9 theories and all this stuff. But yeah, I've had Dr. Richard Sauter on my program. He's written a book on it. Underground cities are very real. I've had people like investigative international renowned journalist Nick Rawson over in Europe tell me he's been in them. He's got like billionaire friends. He told me, listen, Eric, I've seen it with my own eyes. They're very much real. And that's very also interesting. You bring up the whole economic side of things because I have some of the top economic pundits on my program, Gill, people from like Fox News, Fox Business, Gerald Celentes of the world. It's imminent now. So I'm right there with you. That's the next thing that's on my radar is the economic collapse, stock market crash,
Store up food. Even though America is one of the biggest producers of food, and I doubt that we'll get short on food. But the problem that we will have is that many countries will bid for our food, causing food prices to go up about 5 times greater than what they are right now. Remember what the Bible says: you work all day just for your food.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Day's wage. Basically for the food, enough food for the day. And that's what the next area. I'm glad you mentioned that. You segued into my next area, just in terms of prepping. And I've had some, pundits say, store seeds, get your organic seeds now. But then you'll have some people who say, well, who knows what if the soil will even be good as Planet X passes. I'm assuming as it gets closer, perhaps it's going to really kind of make our atmosphere kind of nasty. And I don't know what will kind of dribble down, so to speak. I don't know if you have any theory or thesis on that as it relates to, seed storing, growing gardens. I mean, it seems like the only, what other option do we have? I mean, they're already trying to kill us in our own grocery stores, but I wanted you to talk a little bit more about prepping, communications, family plan, if you can. And that's pretty much the last area that I have for today's discussion.
The Bible gives us an indication that what half of the earth is going to be hit. It's 1/3. It says 1/3 the grass, trees, and it says rivers. Rivers are fresh water. Now they didn't have a word expressing continental crust, but he just described it. So what half of the globe is 1/3 of continental crust? That's North and South America. Now, what's the problem? The main problem during a meteor shower that's going to affect just what you're saying, growing crops, is because the nuclear facilities, we have like 100 and something of them, they can't take a meteor shower. Or they can't take a river being dammed up because the land collapsed. You had a landslide, or if they're along the coastline that a tsunami hit them. Radiation is going to make the ground and the air around here very toxic. So I was offered safe board and room in 2 different facilities. One was by a secret, what you call that? Secret society that manages these underground facilities. Offered me a membership, and I turned them down after I found out all of the data I needed. That's why your passport they issue you a new passport when you're part of this secret society. When you go to a airport, when it scans, it tells the person that this person needs to go to the right, where the general public will go to the left. And the ones on that plane go to the underground facility. The other one goes to some other place, which is not to the underground facilities. And you never see it in, it's all done with the hidden chip in the passport. And I turned him down because even a electrical engineer, he had one of those retired missile bases, silos, that he converted into his into a home, basically. And just like I told him, I said, "Are you within 75 miles of a nuclear power plant?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Can your ventilation stop radiation?" He says, "No." I said, next question. I said, are you 200 miles from Yellowstone? He says, yes. I said, when ash, when 7, 8, 12 inches of ash falls and it rains and it turns to cement, do you have explosives around your door to break up the cement so you can even get out of the ground? He was totally silent. I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to follow what the Bible says. I'm going to be in Jerusalem at the time of this event, probably 6 months ahead of time. Be there for Sukkot, as the Bible instructs you to. Those are two times that He requires you to be in Jerusalem. There's three. There's Sukkot, Passover, and unleavened bread, and they're all three are key for the to be able to do this correctly. It says don't make your trip in the wintertime. So if you follow His instructions, well, you're going to be much better off than trying to, because these people are not using the greater scale of magnitude of this event that we're talking about. An underground facility is a grave. You got to take this above ground.
Right. Yeah, I'm right there with you. They didn't think this thoroughly out.
No, it's way beyond. I mean, a nuclear war would be like a pimple
Oh
compared to
yeah,
this
absolutely.
compared to this big monster that's coming.
No doubt about it, Gil. It's hard to believe we're almost 45 minutes into this conversation. I extended it an extra 15 minutes because Gil and I could sit here and talk for hours. But unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to pick back up perhaps in our next conversation with getting your analysis on these mystery booms, and I want to do it justice. So we'll save it perhaps for next month. I'll get with you right after the program here, and we could set up something for next month. But in any case, I always allow my guest Gil to do some shameless self-promotion time, website, social media, your videos, whatever you want to get out, and then I'll close out the program.
Well, if anybody wants free stuff, just go to my website, planet7x.net, and scroll down about halfway. You see a link for a Google Drive. All of the slides I show in my videos and reference information for the astronomers and biblical scholars or whatever, it's all in there. You can see how this ties in, and there's no way that they can be this accurate up to the hour they are predicting of 2,000 years ago. They didn't have that capability, but yet it's in there. So, like I can only say, it greatly concerns me what we might see occur before the end of this year right here on CO3 and then maybe the start of CO4. But CO3, I think we're going to be having economic problems towards the end of this year, because the 13th month, if remember, after March of 2021, it takes another 93 years before the moon is at the foot of Virgo again, near Passover. And the Bible prophesies this generation that saw Israel formed, that's the Holocaust generation, shall not die out before all is fulfilled. All of Revelation, all of this is going to be fulfilled. So they're already in the age of 85 in 2021. Because age 12, you have to be accountable at age 12. So age 12 in 1948 to 2021, they're 85. They can't wait another 93 years. So, like I said, it greatly concerns me.
Yeah, that's to say the least. Yeah.
me and you, we won't be able to warn the public because the internet will be down. They have to know how to look at Sagittarius, and when they see a comet in Sagittarius, they know that they need to be in Jerusalem for Sukkot. Sukkot is a practice where you build temporary shelter, tent, because that's the only safe place to be during the earth is shaking. A tent doesn't collapse on you and hurt you like a stone building. And that's why he makes you practice building temporary shelters and how to live out of them.
Well, there you
these
have
are practical things he gave us. People lost the practicality through time. But there are practical reasons why he tells you to practice these things.
Well, there you have it, folks. The latest from Gill Broussard. Again, get over to his website today, Planet7X.net. You can also find him on YouTube. I'm going to, after I finish out here, I want to talk to Gill off air briefly. We'll get something set up for next month. Hopefully he has some time for us. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in to TradCatKnight Special Guest Premium Podcast today. If you can, folks, get up top to the donate button if you can, and please help this apostolate stay operational. I appreciate all that you do for this website. Continue to keep me in prayer as I will for you. And until next time, my good friends, let's keep our eyes on the skies. And I hope you all have a very blessed day. Until next time, stay safe and God bless.